welcome to yet another edition of Behind the Scenes, a show where we share a sneak peek of the latest Business Today magazine with all our viewers. I'm Sakshi Batra, and with me on the show I have Mr. Alokesh Bhattacharyya. He's the managing editor of Business Today magazine. Also joining in with us on this discussion is Vidya S, special correspondent, and Rachna Dhanrajani, correspondent of the Business Today magazine as well. Well, great to have you all on the show and on this special edition. I want to kick-start this discussion with Alokesh first, and especially on the cover story, which is a on this very fascinating fight for the top slot in the two-wheeler space, and that's between the erstwhile partners, both Hero and Honda. So, Alokesh, help me understand, does it really look like there could be a change in pecking order in the offing and Honda could actually supersede Hero now?
Thanks, Sakshi. Yes, you're right. In fact, it's a very fascinating battle that's playing out, and it's been playing out for more than 10 years, 12 years, right, from the time that these two companies separated. They were earlier partners, as you would know. It used to be called Hero Honda, right, and they were selling two-wheelers in this market for 26 years before they separated. As for Honda overtaking Hero, it looks very close. If you extrapolate the growth rates from
Yeah.
these over these 12 years, it would look like they would cross. But there is always this a little gap that you really don't know whether it's going to surmount that or not. Who's going to give the big push? Is Hero going to give step on the gas and just sort of move ahead, or is Honda going to finally overtake? It's not something that anybody can predict. There are too many trends and too many layers in this market, right? But if you look at overall in these last 10 years, Honda has grown its sales 73%, and Hero has grown its sales less than that, right, at about 23%. So if you look at those numbers, it would appear. And the other big number that you'd really like to know is in the year FY 2012, that is 2011-12, 1 year after they separated, the difference in the number of vehicles sold between Hero and Honda was 4.1 million vehicles. Hero sold 4.1 million vehicles more than Honda. Last year in FY 21-22, Hero sold only 400,000 vehicles more than Honda, right? And this fiscal, it's even less. So the gap is clearly diminishing, whereas whether Honda will actually manage to cross it or not is quite a different question. Difficult to answer that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a difficult guess, and but we'll keep watching this space. But what are the other trends that one can really spot in this story? And especially one if somebody is very interested to know about the two-wheeler space, we do know that the industry has been going through a lot of speed bumps, but what's really happening now?
See, you're right. The industry has been going through a lot of speed bumps and they're not over yet, right? They're still there. And which is why the sales of the two wheeler industry in India actually peaked in the year 2018-19, when the industry cumulatively sold more than 20 million vehicles. In the year 2011-12, it was 13 million, and in 22, it was back to 13 million. So effectively, despite scaling 20 million in 18-19, our sales in 2022 has actually gone back 10 years, which is a lot. And there are many reasons behind these. One of the primary reasons is that Hero has sold much less, right? Hero being the market leader with 50% market share thereabouts at that time. Now it's less than 40, because they sold less, and the rural markets were very badly hit after 2018-19, right, because of COVID and inflation. And so the buying power of the rural buyer really came down, and that is the soft spot for Hero, the main market for Hero. So they have really suffered because of that, because the rural buyer has found vehicles difficult to buy, a, because their income has come down, and B, because of the newer emission standards of BS6,
Yeah.
the prices of vehicles have gone up, right? Both for the manufacturer and the consumer. So it has gone beyond the means of the villager to buy a motorcycle. Whereas
Sure.
if you look at the city side, the premium bikes are now selling more. So 125, 150 cc, which we call premium, but are not really premium in that sense. We only call it
Yeah.
premium because 100 cc is the bulk of the market here, right?
Right.
And there are the higher cc segments, the really stylish bikes, the one kinds that Royal Enfield sells. Those are the segments that are now going to see a lot of action.
Okay, are you also going to be looking at buying one in the 350cc, 400cc bike? Are you a bike lover yourself?
Of course, I love bikes, and maybe I might want to look at one of them.
Okay, well, hold on to that thought, Alakesh. We will come back to you, but a lot of more interesting stories also in this, issue. And let me just take it across to Vidya now, who's also written on a very grave matter of concern right here. We have seen on the one side, while the auto space has been looking at their own challenges and been grappling with all of that, and there's this tough fight for the top spot. There is another matter of concern that's really taking place in the tech world, and that's as far as the layoffs are concerned, which we've been time and again, looking at in several issues of Business Today and on Business Today TV as well. Several stories have been come about, but Vidya has really pointed out right here that it's not just the tech world, but both big tech and the startup world have been seeing a lot of layoffs, both in India and globally. But and astounding figures, Vidya, you've reported in your story over a lakh and 42,000 layoffs in this entire year so far, and that's a big number. Help me understand, how are employees really dealing with it?
Thank you for having me, Sakshi. So, if we look at the situation for employees of big tech and the startup world, it has been really a pendulum effect for them from in within in less than over a year now. If you see, the situation has gone from the Great Resignation, where they were flooded with offers and 100% joining hikes, to now where it is an absolute uncertainty. So, if you see a lot of big names like, globally and in India, if you see Twitter, Meta, Cisco, Salesforce. In India, of course, there's Zomato, Ola, Meesho, so many startups and big tech companies laying off techies. But the difference this time has been that a lot of the way some of these layoffs have been conducted has have left a lot of these employees absolutely stumped, because a lot of them that I spoke to said, they've had excellent working relationships while they were at the organization, but when it finally came to showing them the door, the organizations weren't necessarily all that empathetic as expected. So a lot of them were, if you see, of course, Twitter was one of the examples that we heard of very a lot about Twitter lately, about how employees were, they received emails on their personal email, and then that meant that they were out of a job. If they received an email on their official account, then it meant that they still had a job. So the way in which some of these companies have gone about laying off staffs have absolutely let them shell shocked. So that's one thing that has emerged this time. And if you see, one of the social cultural trends that this time has really come up is about how some of these employees are not no longer hiding or ashamed of being laid off. In fact, they're boldly
Yeah.
declaring that they got laid off on Twitter and LinkedIn, where
Yeah.
some of the most professional networking events happen. So the way they are going about it this time is by being savvy with their social media strength. So they're really going out there and talking about being laid off, about the opportunities that they may be, and some of them have even found the next opportunities by being vocal on social media. Of course, a lot also has to do with the fact that this is not a performance related layoff, but rather a global situation that a lot of them are having to contend with. So that's also helping them. For instance, we saw a lot of companies and their HRs also actively reaching out to these employees who are vocal on social media and offering them open opportunities, or asking them to send in their resumes and things like that. For instance, we saw gaming startup Dream 11 CEO Harsh Jain post a tweet about how he had a lot of open opportunities for techies who are being laid off. So, a lot of this activity has been happening. And in fact, LinkedIn CEO, Mr. Ryan Roslansky, was also quoted as saying that India, compared to the global, compared to global peers, India has actually been over indexing on networking, on job seeking, on reaching out and messaging peers on the platform. So there's a lot of activity happening, and that's the big difference this time, where employees are no longer held back by these ups and downs in professional careers, but rather actually going out there and speaking and finding the next opportunity through that. So that's one big trend this time.
At least slight bright spots right there in the overall grim situation that we've been facing. But what are the other learnings that both employees and employers have picked up in this entire painful process?
Sure. So, one of the things that companies usually resort to in uncertain times, of course, it's seen as a magic bullet where they cut their headcount and cost and do cost cutting. But if you speak to a lot of HR experts, they say that this is not the best way to really go about it. And especially when The way in which you handle a layoff, with the way in which you handle an exiting employee can have far-reaching consequences on the brand employer in the future. So, and they say that how it is very important to have at least some human interaction in the process, because we've seen a lot of examples in the recent past where multitudes of people have been let go of on one Zoom call or just an email, without there being any kind of a human interaction with the human resources
Yes.
department at all for the employees. And that's not really the best way for anybody to go about it. But this time around, some of the takeaways I think would be that what HR experts point out is that there must, of course, always be a human interaction involved in the process, because there's always, of course, that is the right way to go about it, but there's also the risk of then there being an outburst on social media, which can then absolutely be disastrous for the company's brand reputation as well. So that's another factor. And the way employees are looking at it, if you see, for some of them, it has really altered their relationship with work, because for many of them in India, of course, the primary relationship in many cases is the one they have with their work. So when something like this happens, it of course shakes them up, and it alters their relationship with work. But for many others I spoke to anonymously, of course, they tell me how now the focus is always about going to be about building their own brands, building their own networks, keeping themselves upskill at all times, and of course financial stability. So these are some of the takeaways that employees and employers have from this whole painful process.
Well, thank you so much, Vidya, for sharing all these deeper insights. It does offer a lot of learning for those affected and for those not affected as well. For the employees, community as a whole, there's a lot of learning, I'm sure, and this will be a very insightful read for all our viewers too. Let me take it across to Rachna now. From the startup world. Zomato, the food tech space that definitely caught the eye of investors in the early 2021 when the company got listed, and thereafter we've been seeing a lot of volatility in the stock prices and even in the company. We've seen instances of layoffs right there as well. Some of the top exits have happened in the company. But what's really cooking at Zomato's kitchen as of now in terms of the multiple risky bets that the company has been taking in its quest to be successful? Rachna, give me a sense of what is really happening right there. Has Zomato been able to, hunt for the right recipe that really works for it?
Sure. So as you said, it is one of those startups that was being looked at when it debuted on the bourses last year. It was one of the most anticipated IPOs of the year, and we take a look what has happened in this 1 year. Um, Now Zomato has a couple of ducks to tend to. It has its intra food delivery business. It has dabbled into the online grocery segment, and then there's Hyperpure, which is to provide these gourmet ingredients to restaurants. But the latest one is intercity deliveries, which has caught the eye of many of all Zomato's already existing customers and has gotten new customers on board for the company. But at the same time, we saw company cutting jobs, companies top management exiting one by one. In fact, the latest venture, which was the intercity delivery, the head of this vertical quit the company just 2 months after the launch of it, which is which is what we look at in this particular story in the magazine as to which is the right recipe that will take Zomato, that will sort of accelerate Zomato's path towards profitability, because the company broke
Okay.
even for the intracity delivery module. The company broke even this year, but they anticipated at the launch of intercity. They anticipated that with the launch of intercity, they'd break even much more faster. With intercity, there are a couple of more things. There's air, the flying your food from one city to another. So it obviously comes at a bigger cost than a regular intra-city delivery order. So average per order, which is a metric to judge how the company is going to fare, is about 800 to 900 rupees per order, which is obviously a big number for them. So from what they anticipate, that they are going to get to the destination of profitability. But yeah, our guess is
Sure.
that they're still looking for the right recipe.
Absolutely. So, what does the road ahead really look like? What are the key challenges that still Zomato has to really take into account and overcome?
Sure. As I said, there are a couple of things that they've dabbled into, but with Zomato, the deal has been they struck it right when they started the whole intracity delivery. They started off as Foodie Day, which was a listing and a recommendation portal. At that time, we didn't see any of those websites coming up. There were hardly any competitors in the space. But with now, as Zomato has progressed into grocery market, there are already big players in the industry. There's Swiggy, Instamart, there's Reliance's JioMart. And you also have startups like a Dunzo or a Zepto, which are also providing things at a faster time interval. So Zomato definitely has a big challenge on their hands with Blinkit, which was the most expensive acquisition of the year for them and in the industry. It came at a whopping cost of 4,447 crores. So they have to a justify the acquisition cost, and also scalability is where Zomato has been struggling in the past 1 year. Though Intracity has broke even now, it still lacks scale. So with each and every segment, scale is still an issue.
Okay, well, thank you, Rachna, for that update. Alokesh, let me come back to you. Apart from the challenges that the tech industry has been facing, auto space that you talked about as well, the two-wheeler space after the pandemic, several challenges there. We've seen one more space that actually got hit quite badly as far as the pandemic was concerned, and that was the co-working space. But it seems like post the pandemic, they are coming out bigger and stronger. So, what have been some of the most noticeable trends as far as the co-working space is concerned?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Sakshi. The co-working space has really come back very, very strong. If we just take a look at some numbers, before the pandemic, around 2019, there was about 30 million square feet of space that was taken up by co-working companies, right? And about 4 lakh 70,000 seats. By the end of 2020, when the pandemic was, at its peak, that had gone down to 20 million from 30 million square feet. Number of seats has gone down from 4.7 lakh to 3, right? And then what happened was, after the pandemic, when demand has come back with a vengeance, right? We talk of revenge spending and revenge holidays, and even revenge offices have come back, right?
Okay.
So by June 2022, co-working spaces have now taken up 43.4 million square feet, and there are 6.8 lakh seats, which is expected to go to 50 million square feet and 7.5 lakh seats by the end of this year, and 1 million seats very soon, right? So you can imagine the kind of growth that is happening. Now, what is fueling this growth, right? So there are two, three things happening. One is, of course, uh, you know, co-working spaces were normally looked upon as sort of the next thing after the garage startup, right? You don't have money to have your own office and all. Okay, you take space in the
Yeah,
co-working space, and you just need 5 seats. So why to pay a huge sum?
sure.
So it was mostly for startups, small companies, and all. But now large companies are also leasing office space in co-working spaces because they have a workforce now which is more distributed than it was before the pandemic. So they
Hmm.
need seats and offices in more cities and more towns than they did earlier, and it is not feasible for them to have their own office spaces in all of these places, right?
Hmm.
So they are getting into the co-working space as tenants, right, in a big way, the large corporates. So that is one big trend. And what it has also done is that a lot of co-working space companies are taking up are setting up shop in smaller towns because a lot of the workforce has gone into smaller towns.
Yeah.
Many companies are asking people to come back to office, but many companies are also not asking them to come back to office. They're saying, okay, you want
Hmm.
to come to office, you come to office in your own town. I'll hire a co-working space. There are 5 guys there. Why do 5 guys come to that space and work from there in your own hometown? So this is
Hmm.
the kind of thing that is really fueling this whole activity, and so this space is now looking like a really strong business area to be in.
Absolutely. Sounds quite interesting and a very, very fascinating read yet again. Thank you, Alokesh, and thanks, Vidya and Rachna, all of you, for sharing these wonderful insights from the newest issue of Business Today magazine. And here I do urge all our viewers to please go out there and grab your copies. I have got mine, and I'm going to be giving a thorough read to this one because all the interesting insights from the world of auto, tech, startups, and the co-working space, and much, much more is what you can find in this latest copy. Thank you so much for being with us on this edition, but do stay tuned on to Business Today TV for a whole lot more too.